Let's talk about your biggest expenditure. Your biggest bill, your biggest monthly bill. That expenditure, that thing that's always in your budget, and that one thing that consumes most of your monthly net income. Yeah, rent. You see, globally, majority of adults spend between 20 to 35% of their monthly income on rent, right? And everyone is afraid. Everyone is afraid of being homeless, because if you don't have somewhere to live, you're definitely homeless, right? And nobody wants to live in the streets. Yeah, everyone wants to have that home. And so for that reason alone, you find that yeah, most people are planning to own homes someday, or have that hope of owning their homes. Yeah. And in fact, you find that most people nowadays prefer, to take mortgages, because now with mortgage, uh, you get to sort of pre-own your home, right? Before, fully owning and actually becoming yours, you get to live in it as you pay slowly by slowly, right? And this is just one of the advantages. And actually, another advantage is the fact that you get to sort of pre-own the house a bit cheaper. Someone can argue that even though there are interests that comes with that mortgage, you find that with inflation, especially if your country has high inflation rates, you find that the value of your house right now will be way cheaper compared to the value of your house 25 years later, when probably you're done paying that mortgage, right? So you find that there is an advantage with mortgages, but again, there is some disadvantages that comes with mortgages. Not everyone can access mortgages. Not everyone can actually access that cheap and affordable mortgages. You find that, especially in third world countries, you find that you would be lucky to find a 10% interest rate on mortgages. In fact, I think in Kenya, only the bankers are the ones who access mortgages cheaply, actually below 7%. But in first world countries like America, I think you can get a mortgage for about 4% or 5% interest, right? That's of course if you have some good credit score, right? But and so if you are in a third world country, then it becomes a challenge, because now you find that majority of the people in third world countries are not that rich, So you find that the banks and the lenders of the mortgages, you find that they see them as high risk, and that way you find that they are denied the access to credit, right? And so it becomes a challenge for these people to own homes on their of their own, right? Yeah, and I think it can be a challenge. Yeah, but again, we cannot avoid to talk of the fact that in some first world countries, you find that there are taxes on property, right? For example, here in Kenya, there is no tax on property. Yeah, in most cases, most Kenyans, you find that they own their homes freehold, right? Are not leasehold. So that means that if you have the if you own the house, you've already purchased the house, you don't get to pay taxes on that house. That means that you live in that house free, and the government has nothing to ask from you in the name of property taxes, right? Unless, of course, if you're renting that house, which then qualifies to become a business, and in which now you'll be required by the law to pay taxes on it, right? Because that's a business. But if it's just for, you know, a residential property, if it's a residential property, then definitely you're not paying taxes on it, right? But in some first world countries, you find that there are property taxes, and that means that even though they've already bought their homes, then they still have to pay taxes every month, right? I don't know, is it every month or every year? Yeah, something like that. So you find that that is an extra expenditure, unlike if you're living in a third world country, right? And you've not even counted the maintenance expenditure, right? The cleaning, those cutting grass, make sure the house is well maintained and well kept. I think those are just some extra costs and some extra challenges that comes with government laws, right? I think there were some rumors in 2023 in Kenya that the government was about to introduce some property taxes, and actually, a lot of Kenyans were feeling that this is um, punitive, and people do not like that. The fact that they wanted to introduce the property taxes and so that people can, you know, pay taxes regardless of whether they fully own the house or not. I think there was many Kenyans thought it was punitive, and of course they protested against it. And I think the parliament sort of did not go along with it, right? And actually, I think they were playing with the rules. At some point, I think the bill was supposed to be, uh, you know, lands and properties within 3 kilometer radius in within a town were supposed to be taxed, right? And so a lot of Kenyans were lamenting and complaining about that because most people were questioning the definition of a town according to the law, right? Because now, if you talk of a town, I think according to Kenyan law, if I'm not wrong, I stand corrected. Uh, a town is essentially a place which has a population of 3,000 people and above. And considering that small number of 3,000, that means that this cuts across the country. Each and every center in every part of this country will be considered a town, right? Because now I doubt there is I doubt if there is any town with less than 3,000 people, right? I doubt there is any center with less than 3,000 people. I mean, everywhere in this country, majority at least, have above 3,000 people, and that would be considered a town. That means that all those centers would have been, property within all those centers would have been taxable, right? And so that's just a valid issue that Kenyans raised at that particular time. And there is advantages to owning a house, right? You see, people prefer, they go the long route of mortgages, paying mortgages for 25 years, even 30 years, just to own this house. There has to be an advantage. You see, one of them is um, safety, that comes as a result of owning a house. You see, the other time I heard this politician, one of the politicians in Kenya, talking about, trying to sort of somehow discourage people from purchasing lands and houses and real estates. But I know he might have had some valid argument, but some people thought that he was arguing against purchasing homes, which of course if he was doing that, I'm definitely also against him, right? Against that. Because I think in most cases he was insinuating that purchasing shares is better than having a home, right? But there is that safety that comes with home ownership, right? You see that peace of not worrying about your landlord coming to knock on your door, right? That peace of not worrying about a caretaker or um, lacking income to pay for rent and the risk of going homeless in the process, right? I mean, there is that advantage. So that's why a lot of people are aspiring, aspiring to own homes, right? And then there is also the fear that rent prices tend to always increase, especially with increasing inflation, right? anytime there is a rise in inflation, you find that rent keeps also increasing, right? And sometimes you can find that in some places, especially in big cities where there is high demands, of houses, you find that rent prices tend to increase even faster than the rate at which your income increases, right? And that can be a great concern, especially to a lot of people, right? And so another advantage is people consider houses as investment, right? House is an investment in that it's a way of preserving wealth, right? Let's say, for example, you purchase a house right now, or and it comes with that land, right? So you are saving up on rent. You're not paying rent because now you have your own home, right? And at the same time, property prices tend to increase over time, right? So after something like 20 years in future, you find that the value of your property has probably doubled or even tripled, right? Because now land is gaining prices, especially if your house or your land is located in a very good location where probably infrastructure there is that growth, probably in a outskirts of a city, right? Or a place where government is supposed to sort of build infrastructures, right? You find that your house gets to appreciate in value. And so you find that it's an investment, right? Also, you find that I think investment can also be the scenario where a lot of people sometimes they prefer to sort of rent the house. Let's say they have like a 3-bedroom house or a 4-bedroom house. So you find that they are renting that house, and then they prefer, let's say for example, the rent from that 4-bedroom house is 100,000 per month, right? And then you find that someone is living prefers to collect that 100K and then live in a rented unit of about 50,000, right? So you find that you will always have some constant flow of income of about 50,000 every month, right? From that house. And for me, I think that can be a wise decision. Yeah. So what do you think? Do you have that ambition of owning a house someday? Uh, Tell me that in the comment section. Let's talk about it in the comment section. And what is the advantages and disadvantages? And what are the challenges that you think arises when it comes to home ownership? See you in the next one, of course. If you like the video, leave a like and see you in the next one. Bye.